first thing to know about the crayfish is that it is not, in any sense, a fish. Wearing its skeleton on the outside in the form of a hard shell and having multi-jointed legs, it's closer to the insect family, except that it lives most of its life underwater. As its skeleton shell, though hard, is flexible, the crayfish joins that order of marine animals called crustacea. Its cousins are shrimp, crab, barnacles, and especially lobsters. In fact, the chief difference between lobsters and crayfish is that lobsters live in salt water and crayfish like their water fresh. And that lobsters are sometimes up to 3 feet long and can weigh up to 19 kilograms, while the full-grown adult crayfish weigh in at a few ounces and may reach a length of 12 centimeters, or 5 inches. Essentially, the crayfish, inhabitant of rivers, streams, and lakes in most parts of the world, is a tiny freshwater lobster. Like the lobster, crayfish have a lot of limbs. They use some for walking, some for swimming, some for eating, and the big front ones for grasping and fighting. They're not fussy eaters. They'll make a meal of small fish, insect larvae, decaying plant or animal matter, or, on occasion, each other. When they eat, they use more of those many limbs. Instead of teeth, they have maxillopedes, which means jaw feet. They chew using tiny, raspy legs that are part of their mouths. The miniature mouth legs, there are 3 pair of them, are especially useful when it comes to holding such prey as snails and eating them at the same time. These mouth legs are strong enough and sharp enough to reach a juicy snail in its shell by boring a hole and pulling it out. You could say many hands make light work. Whether fighting or feeding, the crayfish, like any other animal, has to breathe. It manages this by having its gills inside its hard shell and by wafting fresh, oxygen-filled water to them with its little fast-beating mouth legs. They go so quickly, they are like a little cloud of motion. When the season and the water temperature are right, there'll be plankton on the bottoms of the leaves of certain water plants. Tasty stuff to a crayfish. As the days shorten and the chill of autumn comes to its home waters, the crayfish's hormones begin to stir. Inexorably, inevitably, as are most of the creatures of the natural world, it is drawn toward the business of reproduction. It's mating time. The male, on top, releases a cloud of milt onto the female's abdomen. The milt will stick there and will later fertilize the emerging eggs. As winter approaches, the female will retire to a watery burrow, where she will pass the winter and await the coming spring. In the spring, as the eggs are ejected or laid, they pass over the abdomen, come into contact with the waiting male seed, and are fertilized. The eggs hang like bunches of grapes on the female swimmerets, her tiny back legs. Where she goes, her eggs go. Before long, they begin hatching. They are miniature crayfish in larval form. And as larvae, they remain a closely attached family. Like most other egg-laying creatures, the crayfish sets out immediately to provide food for her young. She does this by searching out suitable protein and simply standing there. But life for young crayfish moves swiftly. Very soon, some of the larvae are on their own. Now he must fend for himself. For a brief period, most of the larvae will stay together in schools for mutual protection. They will stay close to the female and will frequently reattach themselves to the convenient swimmerets until each reaches the body size and attains the strength required for independent life. Meanwhile, the mother instinctively protects them as long as possible. The season wears on. Rivers and streams begin to dry up. There is a chill in the night air. The crayfish, normally an underwater dweller, a skilled swimmer, a breather through internal gills, will recreate a major moment in the evolutionary history of animal life. He will, in effect, emerge from the primal sea, crawl onto land, and begin breathing in the open air. Having achieved this monumental step, the crayfish will prepare for the coming winter. He will, quite literally, dig a hole in the soft shore mud and pull the hole in after himself. A true hibernator, the crayfish will live through the coming months, when he has finally dug himself in, by greatly slowing down his metabolic processes. His breathing, the functioning of his life systems, will be barely perceptible. His long night of winter will be spent in a deep and comfortable sleep. A coral reef in the seas off Okinawa. It is nighttime, and many of the creatures of the deep are asleep. But not the cone shells. For these skilled and crafty hunters, it is feeding time. Like crayfish, cone shells are bottom feeders, exploring the deepest nooks and crannies for morsels. But unlike the multi-legged scurrying crayfish, the cone shell slithers unhurriedly, and then he strikes. As a snake might swallow a rabbit by expanding its body to accommodate it, the cone shell wraps its highly flexible mouth around its victim and, without hurrying, engulfs it. Even as digestion begins, competition for the prey is not over. A second cone shell has also sensed the live fish and does not intend to give it up easily. Eventually, the fish is swallowed twice at the same time by two separate attackers. Among the diverse creatures that inhabit the ocean floor are some 500 to 600 different species of the sea snails known as cone shells. Like other snails, they are soft-bodied animals clothed in spiral-shaped shells. But unlike their usually vegetarian cousins, they are meat eaters, and they are poisonous. From inside its flexible mouth, it extends a long tube, a tongue-like organ that is hollow. Inside it are stored vestigial teeth, barbed missiles that can be hurled forward like a harpoon. Other snails and many other soft-bodied creatures have teeth developed for scraping, piercing, or seizing. Cone shell teeth are not only projectiles, they are tiny packages of paralyzing poison. The shells of these mostly tropical animals have been favorites among collectors for centuries. They are prized for their beauty and variety. But cone shells are also feared because they can kill. There are many instances of fishermen and collectors holding cone shells in their hands, feeling a sharp bee-like sting, followed by a numbness, then complete paralysis and death. This is all the more remarkable since most cone shells, and they come in a wonderful variety of amazing shapes, are small creatures, only 1 to 4 inches long. But even such a dangerous predator is inevitably some other animal's prey. The coral crab not only eats cone shells, he wears them. Once he's emptied the shell, he occupies it and makes it his own. The cone shell's ever-probing siphon, or water pipe, is much like an elephant's nose. It searches its surroundings and senses what's there. It samples the texture of surfaces, alert for danger, or for food. Like many undersea dwellers, it has sensory apparatus that enable it to test the currents, to analyze the waters, just as land dwellers might feel the wind and smell the air. A snail itself, the cone shell preys on others of the tens of thousands of different kinds of snails with which it shares its watery environment. So far, neither of these two snails appears aware of the nature of the other. The cone shell, on the bottom, has been perceived as just another smooth rock. This will soon prove a serious mistake. The cone shell, this species is called a textile or cloth of gold cone, slowly and deliberately draws water through its long siphon, tastes it, and detects the presence of prey. It only remains now to locate it and engage it. It's only a matter of time. The siphon probes. Within the aggressively searching snake-like tongue, a harpoon waits, ready for the kill. Inside the harpoon, a deadly substance similar to that used by certain Indian tribes to poison the tips of their arrows. Finally, the cone shell catches up with its prey, and mortal combat is joined. The victim is strong, agile, and determined. Its shell is effective armor, but in its struggles, it exposes its soft inner body. Normally, the smaller snail moves at a snail's pace, by extending and manipulating the large foot with which it closes itself inside its shell. The foot has muscles that carry the snail smoothly over most surfaces. Now these muscles are used to lash furiously against the attacking textile comb. But the cone shell is relentless. Again and again it reaches past its opponent's best defenses and drops its lethal cargo of poison. Victor and vanquished. The battle is over. Both of these creatures have lived the game of life in their world of hunter and hunted for many millions of years. Both are well-protected, skilled survivors. Individuals who will eat and be eaten. Their species will go on and on.